Have you ever noticed that the men who seem most desperate to lead are the ones nobody follows? There's something almost tragic about watching someone try so hard to appear in control, to dominate a conversation, to prove their value through force of will. You can see it in their eyes, that frantic energy, that need for validation disguised as confidence. And here's the strange part. The moment they stop trying, the moment they let go of that desperate grip, everything shifts. Suddenly, they have presence. Suddenly, people lean in. What's happening there? What transforms when you stop performing leadership and simply become it? And why does this feel so impossible when you're talking to a woman you're attracted to? When everything inside you is screaming to prove yourself, to take control, to show her you're the one leading this dance? You've probably felt it before, that moment when you're talking to someone you're drawn to and suddenly you're not yourself anymore. You're performing, you're calculating, you're 3 moves ahead, trying to steer the conversation somewhere specific, trying to create attraction through strategy. And the irony is suffocating. The harder you try to lead, the more you're actually following. Following some script you think will work, following advice you read online, following the ghost of every guy who seemed to make it look easy. You're not leading at all. You're reacting to your own anxiety, trying to outrun the fear that if you just show up as yourself, if you just speak without strategy, it won't be enough. This is where most people misunderstand Machiavelli. They read The Prince and think it's about manipulation, about cunning tactics and strategic deception. They think power is something you take, something you perform, something you impose on others through clever moves. But here's what they miss. Machiavelli was writing about something much deeper than tactics. He was writing about the nature of authority itself, about why some people command respect without demanding it, why some leaders inspire loyalty without coercion, why some people walk into a room and the energy shifts around them. He wasn't teaching manipulation. He was observing the mechanics of genuine influence. And the uncomfortable truth at the heart of it all is this: real power is never desperate. Real authority never announces itself. Real leadership is so quiet, so internally grounded, that it doesn't need to prove anything. Think about the last conversation you had where you felt completely at ease, where you weren't trying to impress anyone, where you spoke from genuine curiosity rather than agenda. Maybe it was with an old friend. Maybe it was with someone you had no romantic interest in. Maybe it was when you'd already decided the outcome didn't matter. Notice what happened to your presence in those moments. Notice how your voice deepened slightly, how your gestures became more natural, how you actually listened instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. That version of you, the one who shows up when you're not trying to control the outcome, is more magnetic than any technique could ever make you. That's the paradox we're going to explore. The person you become when you stop trying to become anyone is exactly who people want to follow. The psychology behind this runs deeper than you might think. When you enter a conversation with someone you're attracted to, your nervous system is already activated. Your amygdala is firing, flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline, preparing you for a threat that doesn't exist. Your brain, still wired for survival on the African savanna, can't distinguish between facing a predator and facing potential rejection. So it does what it's always done. It makes you hyper-vigilant, hyper-aware, desperate to control every variable. This is your fight or flight response, masquerading as confidence. This is why your mind races, why you rehearse what you'll say next instead of hearing what she's saying now, why you feel like you need to fill every silence, guide every topic, maintain constant control of where this is going. You're not leading, you're managing anxiety. And she can feel it. This is what most people don't realize. Human beings have mirror neurons that unconsciously detect and reflect the emotional states of others. When you're anxious, when you're performing, when you're desperate to steer the interaction toward a specific outcome, she's feeling all of that beneath your words. It doesn't matter how smooth your lines are, how well you've memorized the techniques, how perfectly you're executing the script. The undertone, the emotional frequency you're broadcasting, is screaming desperation. It's communicating that you need something from her, that you're incomplete without her validation, that her response determines your worth. And nothing repels genuine connection faster than that energetic neediness, that subtle but unmistakable message that you're not offering companionship, but seeking rescue from your own insecurity. Here's where it gets fascinating. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, but what he really understood was the nature of respect. He knew that people don't respect what they can predict, what bends to accommodate them, what needs their approval. Respect flows toward that which is sovereign, self-contained, immovable, not through stubbornness, but through genuine self-possession. When you enter a conversation trying to make her like you, trying to steer her toward attraction, you've already surrendered your sovereignty. You've made her the authority and yourself the supplicant. You're not leading, you're auditioning. And nobody follows someone who's auditioning for approval. But here's the thing that changes everything. True leadership in conversation, the kind that creates genuine attraction and connection, isn't about steering at all. It's about presence so complete that others naturally orient toward it. Think about the most magnetic people you've met. They weren't the ones working hardest to impress you. They were the ones who seemed utterly comfortable in their own skin, who spoke when they had something to say and were silent when they didn't, who asked questions out of genuine curiosity rather than calculated interest, who could hold space for disagreement without becoming defensive. They had what psychologists call an internal locus of control, meaning their sense of worth came from within rather than from external validation. This internal authority is what Machiavelli was really describing when he wrote about power. It's not something you do, it's something you are. The uncomfortable truth is that most advice about talking to women is actually teaching you to be less of yourself, to optimize away your authenticity in favor of what supposedly works. Learn these lines. Create mystery. Always be leading somewhere. Never show too much interest. Maintain frame. Control the conversation. And while some of this can produce short-term results, while you might occasionally manipulate your way into attraction, you're building a house on sand. Because the moment you relax, the moment you stop performing, the real you shows up, and she realizes she was connecting with a character, not a person. This is cognitive dissonance in action, the psychological discomfort that arises when reality doesn't match the image. And more damaging than losing her is what you're doing to yourself. The way you're teaching your nervous system that who you really are isn't enough, that you need to hide behind technique and strategy to be worthy of connection. Let's talk about silence for a moment, because this is where most people reveal their insecurity. You're talking with someone and a natural pause arrives, a moment where neither of you is speaking, and immediately you feel pressure, that rising anxiety that screams at you to fill the void, to say something, anything, to keep the momentum going. So you force a question, manufacture an observation, desperately throw words into the gap. But here's what you don't realize. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is space. Silence is confidence. Silence is saying, without words, that you're comfortable enough in your own presence that you don't need constant stimulation, constant validation, constant proof that this is working. When you can sit in silence with someone without anxiety, when you can let conversations breathe, you're demonstrating the ultimate form of leadership because you're leading yourself first. Machiavelli understood that the appearance of power matters, but he also understood something deeper. That appearance must be grounded in reality, or it crumbles under pressure. You can pretend to be confident, you can mimic the behaviors of self-assured people, you can act your way through interactions, but eventually, stress will reveal the truth. Eventually, something unexpected will happen. She'll challenge you, or test you, or simply be authentically herself in a way that doesn't match your script, and in that moment, your performance will crack. This is why technique without transformation is just manipulation. This is why learning what to say without understanding who to be is building a facade that will eventually collapse. The question isn't how to talk to women. The question is how to become the kind of person who doesn't need to ask that question. And this is where it gets uncomfortable because the answer requires something most people aren't willing to do. You have to turn inward. You have to examine why you need to lead, why you're uncomfortable with uncertainty, why someone else's approval holds so much power over your sense of self. This usually traces back further than you think. Maybe you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where you had to perform to be valued, where your worth was tied to achievement or compliance. Maybe you learned early that showing vulnerability meant being hurt, that letting someone else see the real you was dangerous, that you needed to stay in control to stay safe. These defense mechanisms made sense then. They protected you, but now they're isolating you, keeping you trapped in a pattern where you can never fully connect because you're never fully present. Here's the pattern you might recognize. You meet someone you're attracted to, and immediately your brain starts calculating. What is she like? How can I be that? What should I say to create attraction? You're not meeting her. You're trying to solve her like a puzzle, trying to figure out the right combination of behaviors that will unlock what you want. And in this process, you disappear. The real you, with your actual thoughts and feelings and quirks and uncertainties, gets pushed aside in favor of the optimized version, the strategic version, the version that supposedly works. But here's the tragedy. Even if it works, even if she's attracted to this performance, you'll never feel truly seen because you're not showing her anything true. You'll have connection, but it will be hollow. You'll have attraction, but it will be based on fiction. And you'll spend the entire relationship waiting for the moment she discovers who you really are and leaves. The psychology behind genuine attraction is actually counterintuitive. Research in attachment theory shows that people are drawn to secure attachment figures, individuals who can be both close and independent, who can offer intimacy without enmeshment, who can provide support without neediness. This creates what's called a secure base, a relationship where both people feel safe being themselves because neither is trying to control or complete the other. But you can't fake this. You can't perform secure attachment while being anxiously attached. Your nervous system will betray you. Your subtle behaviors, your micro expressions, your energetic presence will communicate the truth that you're desperate for her to feel something missing in you, that you need her validation to feel whole, that you're not actually secure at all. So what's the real Machiavellian move here? What's the quiet mental game that actually works? It's this. Lead yourself so completely that others naturally follow. Focus so intensely on becoming internally grounded that external validation becomes background noise. Build a life so rich, so purposeful, so aligned with your values that whether or not someone is attracted to you barely registers as important. This sounds like avoidance, like you're just giving up on connection. But it's the opposite. When you stop needing specific outcomes, when you stop trying to make people like you, when you show up to conversations offering your genuine presence rather than seeking validation, you become magnetic. Not because you're employing technique, but because you've transcended the need for technique. Think about this. When you're talking with someone and you're genuinely curious about them, when you're asking questions because you actually want to know the answers, when you're sharing stories because they're meaningful to you, not because you think they'll impress her, something shifts. The conversation becomes real. The energy becomes real. You're no longer performing leadership. You're demonstrating it through your comfort with being exactly who you are. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote about virtù, that quality of internal excellence and self-mastery that makes others naturally want to follow you. It's not about dominating. It's about being so centered in yourself that you create a gravitational field others are drawn into. The long-term consequence of trying to lead through control, through technique, through manipulation is exhaustion. You're constantly monitoring yourself, constantly adjusting, constantly performing. You can never relax because relaxing means the mask slips. You can never be vulnerable because vulnerability means losing control. You create relationships where you're always on stage, always managing impressions, always terrified that the real you will leak through. This is neuroplasticity working against you. Every time you choose performance over authenticity, you're strengthening the neural pathways that tell you who you really are isn't enough. You're training your brain to believe that connection requires deception. And over time, you forget how to just be yourself because yourself has become buried under layers of strategy. But here's the validation you need to hear. The desire to take the lead, to feel confident in interactions, to be someone others are drawn to. This is not wrong. This is not toxic masculinity or misguided ambition. This is a legitimate human need for agency, for effectiveness, for the ability to create connection rather than just hoping it happens to you. The mistake isn't wanting to lead. The mistake is thinking leadership is about controlling others rather than mastering yourself. The mistake is trying to impose your agenda rather than showing up with such clarity of purpose that others naturally align with it. The mistake is seeking external validation when the only validation that ever truly satisfies comes from within. And maybe that's the real story here. Maybe the reason you're searching for techniques to talk to women, to take the lead, to quietly control the interaction, is because somewhere along the way, you learned that who you are isn't enough. Maybe you've been told, directly or indirectly, that you need to be more, do more, achieve more to deserve connection. Maybe you've internalized the message that love and attraction are things you earn through performance rather than receive through authentic presence. And so you're here, reading about Machiavellian mental games, looking for the secret formula that will finally make you enough. But the formula doesn't exist because you're already enough. The work isn't learning how to lead. The work is unlearning the belief that you need to prove your leadership. Here's what true mastery looks like in practice. You're talking with someone you find attractive. Instead of calculating your next move, you notice what you're genuinely curious about and ask. Instead of filling silences with nervous chatter, you let the conversation breathe. Instead of steering toward a specific outcome, you remain present with what's actually happening. When she says something you disagree with, you don't perform agreement to maintain attraction. You express your genuine perspective with respect. When she tests you, when she challenges your views or pushes back on something you've said, you don't see it as a threat to your leadership. You see it as two people engaging authentically, and you respond from a place of curiosity rather than defensiveness. This is leading not through control, but through example, showing rather than telling, being the kind of presence that makes others feel safe being themselves. The transformation happens in layers. First, you notice the performance, catching yourself in the act of trying to control the outcome. Then, you practice choosing presence over performance, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you feel exposed. Then, over time, you build enough evidence that your authentic self creates genuine connection and the anxiety lessens. Your nervous system learns that you don't need to be in control to be safe. Your attachment style shifts from anxious to secure. And one day, you realize you're having conversations where you're not thinking about leading at all because you're simply being yourself, and that self is enough. People are drawn to you not because you're employing techniques, but because you've become someone worth being drawn to. Machiavelli's real insight, the one most people miss, was that true power comes from understanding human nature deeply enough that you don't need to manipulate it. When you understand that people respect authenticity, that they're drawn to presence, that they follow those who are genuinely self-possessed, you stop trying to create attraction through strategy and start becoming attractive through substance. This is the quiet mental game, not learning tricks but becoming genuine, not controlling others but mastering yourself, not leading through dominance but through the kind of internal authority that makes others naturally want to follow. So here's the reframe. You don't need to learn how to talk to women. You need to learn how to talk to yourself, to examine the beliefs that tell you you're not enough, to heal the wounds that make you desperate for external validation, to build a relationship with yourself that's so solid that whether or not someone else is attracted to you doesn't shake your foundation. When you do this work, when you become internally grounded, conversations stop being tests you need to pass and become opportunities to connect with another human being. And in that space, real attraction happens. Not the manufactured kind that comes from technique, but the genuine kind that comes from two people actually seeing each other. You are not broken for wanting to lead. You are not flawed for struggling in these interactions. You are not weak for seeking guidance. You're simply human, carrying the same insecurities and desires we all carry, trying to navigate the complex world of connection and attraction with whatever tools you've been given. The invitation here is to put down the tools that ask you to be someone else and pick up the one that asks you to be more deeply yourself, to stop performing leadership and start embodying it, to stop trying to take the lead and realize you've been leading yourself all along. Every time you choose authenticity over strategy, presence over performance, genuine curiosity over calculated interest, you're exercising the kind of quiet mental mastery that Machiavelli would recognize as true power. This is the transformation, from believing you need to control others to realizing you need to trust yourself. From thinking attraction is something you create through technique to understanding it's something that emerges when two authentic people meet. From trying to be the person you think others want to becoming so fully yourself that the right people can't help but be drawn to you. This is how you talk to women and quietly take the lead. Not by leading them, but by leading yourself so completely that they naturally want to walk alongside you.